She stepped into the studio wearing a patched-up dress and shoes 2 sizes too small. No parent by her side. No music to guide her. Just a single voice and a heart full of love for the mother lying in a hospital bed. Most people in the room doubted she would last even 10 seconds. But when 7-year-old Laya opened her mouth to sing, the entire studio fell silent. Among the quiet was a judge whose past came rushing back with every word she sang. The song she chose was a secret known only to him and one other person in the world. And that little girl, she just might be the daughter he never knew existed. This is a story of love lost and found, of sacrifice and second chances, and of the incredible power a child's voice holds to heal wounds time tried to erase. Stay with us, because what begins as a simple audition turns into a miracle no one saw coming. The hospital room was still, except for the steady beep of machines and the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Outside, a cold wind swept through the trees, shaking brittle leaves against the window pane. Inside, 7-year-old Laya Anderson sat quietly beside her mother's hospital bed. Her small fingers gripped a pale, unresponsive hand. Her eyes were swollen from crying, though no tears remained. She had cried herself dry days ago. Now she just sat, hoping, whispering. Praying. Please wake up, Mama, she murmured for what felt like the 100th time. I'll be a good girl, I promises, just please. Her mother, Venus, had been unconscious since the accident. One moment they were walking to the market, the next a drunk driver came speeding around the corner, and everything went dark. Venus had pushed Laya out of the way just in time, taking the full impact of the motorcycle herself. That had been 5 days ago. The doctor said Venus had a strong will to live, but her body needed time. Time? That word was always repeated. But time didn't pay for hospital beds or medicine, or the meals Laya had stopped eating. A soft knock came at the door. Laya turned to see Mrs. Nora, their landlady. Standing there, a silver-haired woman with kind eyes and a voice as gentle as warm tea. Laya, sweetheart, have you eaten anything today? She asked softly. Laya shook her head. Mrs. Nora stepped inside hesitantly. Come now, I made some toast and jam. Just a little. You can't help your mama if you faint. I don't want to go home, Laya whispered. It's too quiet without her. And I don't want to leave her alone. The old woman gave a sad smile and knelt beside her. You're such a brave little thing, she said, brushing a strand of hair behind Laya's ear. But brave doesn't mean you shouldn't eat. I'll eat here, Laya said quietly. Just stay with me. Mrs. Nora nodded and sat down beside her. We're behind on the rent, you know, she said softly, almost to herself. And the hospital? Well, I heard the nurses talking your mama's bills are piling up. Laya's chin trembled. She fought back tears and clenched her fists. There has to be a way, she said softly. Laya, you're just a child. No, I can help, the girl said firmly, turning to face her. I have to, Mrs. Nora sighed, torn between admiration and worry after a pause. Her eyes brightened a little as if she'd remembered something. There's a singing contest, she said quietly. At Harper Music Studios. A big one, there's a singing contest. Mrs. Nora said gently. They're holding auditions for kids this weekend. The winner gets a scholarship, and even the runners-up receive prize money. Laya blinked in surprise. A singing contest. She'd heard about it on the radio that morning. Nora nodded. And I've heard you sing, little one. You have the sweetest voice I've ever heard. Like a little bird on a spring morning. Laya blushed softly. It's worth a try, isn't it? The woman said, her voice gentler now. Even if you don't win, maybe someone important will hear you. Sometimes the right song reaches the right heart. Laya glanced back at her mother. Venus looked so peaceful, so far away. She whispered, I used to sing for Mama when she cooked. She said my voice made her heart feel light. Then, to herself, she added, maybe it can wake her heart up too. Suddenly, she stood up as if something inside her had clicked. I'll do it, she said firmly. For Mama. Mrs. Nora smiled through tears. Then we better find you something to wear, child. Laya's eyes brightened. I'll wear the dress Mama fixed for my birthday, she said quickly. It's a little short now, but it's still pretty. The old woman's eyes filled with tears. Then go and sing with all the love you have. That's all any of us can do. As the sun set behind the hospital walls, painting the windows with soft golden light, Laya squeezed her mother's hand one last time and whispered, I'm going to sing for you, Mama. I'm going to save you. And with that, a quiet little girl stepped out into a loud, uncertain world, armed with nothing but her voice, a patched-up dress, and a love too big for her small heart to carry alone. The next morning, the city air was crisp, tinged with the scent of distant rain and car exhaust. Laya stood in front of the grand glass building of Harper Music Studios, her tiny hand clutching the straps of a canvas tote bag. Inside was her mother's mended dress, blue cotton with faded lace, and a small water bottle wrapped carefully in a napkin from Mrs. Nora. To everyone else passing by, she looked like a child waiting for someone. But when she took a deep breath and stepped through the studio doors alone, she became so much more. The lobby buzzed with noise. Cameras flashed, children in designer outfits practiced scales, and parents hurried back and forth with forms and clipboards. Laya tried not to stare. She approached the registration table and waited patiently until a tall woman in a red blazer noticed her. "Hi there, sweetie," the woman said, kneeling slightly. "Are you here with someone?" "No, ma'am," Laya replied politely. "I'm here to audition." The woman blinked in surprise. "And how old are you?" "7. The staff nearby exchanged glances. One man whispered, "She's alone. My mom's in the hospital." Laya added quietly, "I want to win so I can help her." The woman's face softened. She glanced down at the old sneakers peeking out from beneath Laya's coat, then back up to the girl's solemn eyes. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Laya Anderson." At that, the woman froze. So did the assistant beside her. A heavy silence hung between them. "Is something wrong?" Laya asked, tilting her head. "No, not at all," the woman said quickly. The woman smiled gently and said, "It's just a very familiar name." She handed Laya a clipboard and crouched down to help her fill out the form. When they reached the space for emergency contact, Laya hesitated. "Can I write Mrs. Nora?" she asked quietly. "She's not family, but she's helping me." The woman nodded slowly. "That's perfectly fine." After signing in, Laya was led to a large waiting area where dozens of children sat. Some had vocal coaches whispering advice. Others practiced with earbuds in their ears. Laya sat quietly in a corner, softly humming a tune only she and her mother knew. Hours passed. Finally, a voice called out, "Contestant 216, Laya Anderson." She stood up, clutching her bag tightly. A production assistant led her down a long hallway and into the audition room. The space was huge and intimidating. 3 judges sat behind a long table, and in the center, under a warm spotlight, stood a single microphone. At the far end of the panel sat a man Laya recognized instantly from television and YouTube videos. Zane Harper. The real Zane Harper. Her eyes lit up. "Mama always said I should learn to sing like you," she whispered under her breath. Zane glanced down at the form in front of him, then looked up startled. "Your name is Laya Anderson?" he asked slowly. "Yes, sir," she replied with a small smile. "That's my full name." Zane leaned forward, a strange tightness gripping his chest. His fingers tightened around the paper. There was something in her face, her eyes, something achingly familiar. "Do you have a track?" one of the other judges asked. Laya shook her head. "No music. I'd like to sing it plain. That's how Mama likes it best." "All right?" Zane said softly. "Go ahead, sweetheart." She took a deep breath and stepped forward. The room fell completely still. Then she began to sing. Her voice was soft but clear, like a silver thread drifting through the quiet morning air. No fancy notes, no acrobatics, just raw, unfiltered feeling. She sang a lullaby her mother had written, a song never recorded, never heard outside their small apartment kitchen. The melody floated like a gentle whisper. Zane froze. His heart stuttered in his chest. He knew that song. He had heard it once on his birthday long ago, in a tiny rented apartment with peeling wallpaper and mismatched plates. Back when Venus had brought out a small cake and said, "This is all I could do, but it's made with love." And then she had sung that very same song to him. Zane's hand trembled. A sharp pain stabbed deep in the center of his chest. When Laya finished, the room fell into a heavy silence. Then slowly the judges began to applaud, softly at first, their hands hesitant, before the sound swelled into a genuine, heartfelt ovation. "Who needs background music when you have a voice like that?" one judge whispered, all evident in their voice. Laya smiled shyly, her eyes flickering toward Zane. But Zane couldn't speak. He sat frozen, eyes wide, jaw clenched tight, a question burning in his mind, terrifying and undeniable. Could this be my daughter? The following morning, the results were posted on a large bulletin board inside Harper Music Studios. The names were typed neatly in black ink, arranged by audition number. Clusters of children gathered with their parents, eagerly pointing and whispering to one another. Laya stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, clutching the strap of her canvas tote, Her eyes carefully scanned the list, line by line, until they landed on hers contestant number 206 Laya Anderson rank. First her heart leapt, then skipped a beat. "I made it," she whispered, barely daring to believe. There were no cheers, no flashing cameras, no proud parents rushing toward her. But for Laya, that simple name on the list meant more than any parade or celebration. She turned to leave, ready to head toward the practice rooms, when whispered voices stopped her in their tracks. "Did you see who got first place? That little girl with the worn-out shoes." "Yeah, what a joke. I heard she came alone, no mom, no dad. Must have had help from someone." Laya froze but didn't look back. She had heard whispers like these before, in school hallways, grocery stores, even at church. People who thought that kids like her didn't belong in places where polished floors shone and grand pianos stood proud. But this time the whispers grew louder. Later, during rehearsal, Laya stood near the studio door when 3 older girls approached. They wore matching sequin jackets and wore the kind of smiles Laya knew all too well. Smiles that weren't kind at all. "Hey," one sneered as she circled her. "You're the girl who sang yesterday, right?" Laya nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. The tallest girl crossed her arms and smirked. Funny how someone with nothing ends up with the top rank. "I just sang," Laya answered quietly. "Yeah, sure," another girl scoffed. "That's why Zane Harper's been watching you like a hawk." "Did you even have to audition, or did he just hand it to you?" A tight knot formed in Laya's chest. "I don't know what you mean," she said softly. "You don't belong here." The tallest girl spat. "Look at your clothes. This is for professionals, not charity cases." Before Laya could move away, the girl shoved her roughly. She stumbled backward and crashed hard onto the polished floor. Her elbow scraped painfully against the cold tile floor. But the tears that welled in her eyes weren't from the scrape. They came from the sharp sting of humiliation. Just then, a deep, commanding voice cut through the silence of the hallway. "What's going on here?" Everyone froze. At the end of the hall stood Zane Harper, tall and imposing, his presence filling the space like a shadow. His face was calm but unreadable, and his voice carried an icy edge. The 3 girls immediately straightened, panic flashing across their faces. Without hesitation, Zane walked over to Laya and knelt beside her. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently, helping her to her feet. Laya nodded quietly, brushing dust off her worn patched dress. Zane turned sharply to the girls, his voice firm and unwavering. "Do you honestly believe talent only comes from wealth? That kindness is a weakness. Let me make this perfectly clear. This competition is about heart, not about what you wear." The girls lowered their heads in shame. "We're sorry, Mr. Harper," one whispered. "You will be," he said coldly. "And if I hear about any more bullying, you won't just be disqualified. You'll be remembered for all the wrong reasons." The hallway fell silent as the girls hurried away. Turning back to Laya, who stood quietly with her head bowed, Zane asked softly, "Why didn't you tell anyone they were bothering you?" Laya shrugged, voice barely above a whisper. "People always say I don't belong. I thought maybe they were right." Zane knelt again, resting a warm, reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't ever believe that. You earned your place here, Laya. No one gave it to you, least of all me." She lifted her gaze, studying the man's face. "You remind me of someone I used to know," he said softly. "Someone brave, someone kind, someone who sang straight from the heart." "Mama sings like that," Laya whispered. "What's her name?" Zane asked carefully. Laya hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Her name is Venus. Venice Anderson." Zane froze as if time had stopped. His throat tightened, his heart pounding fiercely. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. Slowly, he stood, eyes fixed on her face, the same eyes, the same smile, that name. He didn't need a DNA test. He knew. Laya was his daughter. A heavy silence hung between them, thick with years lost and words left unspoken. Zane took a slow, trembling breath. "Laya," he said gently, "I have to ask you something very important." She looked up at him, eyes wide with quiet curiosity. "Do you know who your father is?" Laya shook her head. "No one ever told me," she whispered. "Mama said he was a dream that didn't come true." Tears filled Zane's eyes. Kneeling once more, his voice cracked with emotion. "Sweetheart, I think I'm your father." Laya stared at him, the weight of his words settling deep inside her, disbelief and hope tangled together in her young heart. At first, the words barely registered. Then, as if a long-forgotten melody began to play inside her chest, she whispered, "You're my dad." Zane nodded, overwhelmed with emotion. There in the quiet studio hallway, the daughter he never knew he had, and the man who once walked away from everything he loved stood face to face for the very first time. The beginning of everything. The road to the hospital was silent that evening. The sun had dipped low behind the city skyline, casting long amber shadows across the streets. In the passenger seat of Zane Harper's sleek black car, Laya sat quietly, clutching her mother's wool scarf. She hadn't spoken much since he told her the truth, and Zane hadn't pushed her either. Every few seconds, he stole glances at her through the corner of his eye, his heart beating like a metronome set too fast. She didn't cry, she didn't smile. She just stared out the window, lost in thought. When they arrived at Yoda Hospital, Laya led the way. Her footsteps were small but certain, echoing softly down the sterile hallway until they stopped in front of room 112. Zane hesitated at the door, his hand resting on the handle but frozen in place. Laya looked up at him. "She's inside," he nodded, trying to steady his breath. Nothing could have prepared him for the sight that greeted him when he stepped inside. There on a narrow hospital bed lay Venus. She looked fragile, far thinner than he remembered. Her once glowing skin now pale, her hair gently brushed over the pillow by some kind nurse. Machines blinked quietly beside her, their steady rhythms calm and constant. Zane stood frozen. It had been nearly 8 years, but in that moment all the love, the memories, and the regret crashed down on him like a tidal wave. He moved slowly to the bed and sat beside her, as if afraid she might vanish if he breathed too hard. With trembling fingers, he reached for her hand. "Venus," he whispered. Her hand was cold. "Venus, it's me. It's Zane." His voice cracked on her name. Beside him, Laya stood still, watching closely. "She's been asleep a long time," Laya whispered. "But I think she still hears us." Zane bowed his head, tears spilling freely. "I'm so sorry," he said, voice breaking. "I didn't know, I never knew she was carrying our child. I never knew she was all alone." He looked at Laya, his voice barely a breath. "I should have been there." Laya reached over gently and placed her mother's hand in his. "Now you are." Hours passed. Zane never left her side. Nurses came and went. Eventually, Laya curled up in the recliner with her scarf and fell asleep. But Zane stayed, speaking softly to Venus, telling her everything: the fame, the loneliness, the hollow awards, the nights he stared out windows wondering why nothing felt whole. He told her about Laya, about the way she sang, about how brave she'd been then. Just after midnight, her fingers twitched. Zane blinked in surprise. "Venus." Another twitch. He stood, heart racing. "Venus, can you hear me?" A long pause. Then, slowly, her eyes fluttered open, glazed at first, unfocused. She blinked again, the world around her coming into shape. Then she saw him. "Zane," she whispered, her voice dry, cracked, but unmistakably hers. He nearly collapsed. Yes, it's me." "I'm here." Venus stared, confused. "Is this a dream?" Zane gently kissed the back of her hand. "No, my love. I promise, it's real." Tears slid down the corners of her eyes. "How did you know?" "She led me back to you," he said, nodding toward the chair. Venus turned her head slowly and saw her daughter sleeping nearby. "Laya," she whispered. "That's the song you once wrote for me," Zane said. Voice breaking, the same words, the same melody. And the moment I heard it, I knew. Venus let out a soft sob. "I taught her that song," she whispered. "I told her it was the sound of love." Zane gently stroked her hair. "She is the sound of love." They sat together in silence, their hands entwined like vines once torn apart by time, now carefully rejoined. "I'm so sorry," Venus finally said. "I wanted to tell you, but when you left for America, I knew if I said anything, you'd stay, and I couldn't take that from you." Zane shook his head, tears in his eyes. "You were never a burden, Venus. You were my beginning, my home." He glanced back at Laya, still peacefully asleep. "We have a second chance now," he said. "For her, for us." Venus smiled faintly, exhaustion in every muscle but a warm flicker in her eyes. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered. Zane leaned down and kissed her forehead, pressing it gently as if to anchor himself. "From the moment I lost you, I never stopped looking for you," he said softly, "even when I didn't know I was." That night, in a quiet hospital room bathed in the soft glow of dim yellow lights, a family lost to time began to heal, slowly, tenderly, like a lullaby returning after years of silence. 2 weeks had passed since Venus opened her eyes. In that short time, the sterile hospital room had transformed. It was now filled with laughter, flowers sent by the studio staff, and the gentle hum of lullabies whispered by a little girl sitting at her mother's bedside. Laya never left her mother's side, except to rehearse. And Zayn, once a man too busy for anything but fame, now barely glanced at his phone. He was busy relearning how to be a father. Each morning Zayn brought breakfast, sometimes burnt, sometimes cold, but Venus never complained. She simply smiled and teased, "You still make terrible eggs." They would laugh, and Laya would roll her eyes with a grin. The kind only a child who feels safe again can give. One evening, as Venus rested and Laya brushed her doll's hair by the window, Zayn gently took Venus's hand. "I've been thinking," he said softly. "Oh no," Venus teased, smiling. "Should I be worried?" He smiled back. "Maybe, but not in the way you think." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Venus blinked, unsure at first, then her breath caught. Inside the box sat a modest but beautiful ring, a simple gold band with a tiny sapphire. The same deep blue as the sky on the day they'd first met. "I've spent years with cameras in my face," he said, kneeling beside the bed. "But I've never been more nervous than I am now. Venus, will you marry me?" The room was quiet except for the soft clicking of the heart monitor and Laya's gasp from across the room. Venus stared at him, tears welling, not from pain this time, but from something far sweeter. "Yes, Zayn," she whispered, smiling through her tears. "Yeah," squealed, rushing over and throwing her arms around both of them. "Does this mean I get to wear a pretty dress?" Zayn laughed. "Not just pretty. Sweetheart, the prettiest." The wedding wasn't a grand celebrity affair. It was held in a small chapel on the edge of town, the same chapel where Zayn's parents had married decades before. Venus wore a borrowed gown, and Laya carried wildflowers in a hand-woven basket. The room was filled with warmth, not from chandeliers or famous guests, but from hearts that had found their way back to each other. When the priest said, "You may kiss the bride," Laya clapped so hard she dropped her basket. A few months later, as spring crept in with bird songs and soft breezes, Zayn and Venus welcomed not one, but two new additions to their family, a pair of healthy twins, a boy and a girl. In the delivery room, Zayn cried harder than anyone. Laya was the first to hold them after their parents. She looked down at their tiny fingers and said solemnly, "Don't worry, I'll help raise them right." Spoken like a true big sister, Venus murmured proudly. One Saturday morning, Zayn invited Venus and Laya to visit his recording studio, now bustling more than ever. But this time, they weren't guests, they were his family. He gathered everyone in the main hall. "I want to introduce you all officially," he said, resting a hand on Laya's shoulder. "This is my daughter, Laya. Some of you knew her as the girl who topped the auditions, but now you know why." Laya smiled shyly. "And this," he continued, turning to Venus, "is my wife, the woman who once sang me a song that changed my life." The staff applauded, not politely, but with real warmth. People had watched Zayn change over these past months. He smiled more, listened more, and for the first time, he brought photos of Laya, Venus, and the twins into his once pristine impersonal office. One evening, long after the babies had been fed and tucked in, Zayn and Venus sat on the porch of their new home. Modest, sun-washed, and surrounded by trees. Laya sat on the swing, humming the same lullaby that started it all. "I used to think success meant crowds cheering," Zayn said quietly. Watching the stars, Venus leaned her head on his shoulder. "And now I think it means hearing our daughter sing while holding your hand." Venus smiled, eyes misty. "You always were poetic." "No," he said, "just finally learning what matters." In the warmth of that porch, under the gentle music of crickets and the laughter of children echoing from inside, a family once broken by silence found harmony again. Because sometimes, the purest songs come not from studios, but from the hearts of those who have truly lost and then found love. And love, when real, always finds its voice again. And so, the story of Laya Anderson comes to an end. From a poor little girl sitting quietly by her mother's hospital bed to a young voice that silenced an entire auditorium, and finally to a daughter who unknowingly found her lost father on a stage built for dreams. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, so together, we can preserve these stories of love.